Morning, everyone. It's Sean with Paycheck the Portfolio. This morning, we're going to do a Spark to Fire Week 14 update. We're going to jump right into the brokerage account. I'm going to show you around the E-Trade platform, and we're going to look at balances. We're going to look at margin maintenance. My paycheck doesn't hit till next week, so we'll make the next deposit and the next purchases next time around. But let's jump right in to the brokerage account, and I can show you around. I'm going to give a quick portfolio update. All of the holdings are current as of last week. Currently, the net account value is sitting at $3,114. As I've said multiple times, the market's been extremely choppy because of earnings season, rate cuts, how the Fed is going to respond to rate cuts over the next year. This week, this morning actually, we have the delayed jobs report. We also have inflation report coming Friday, and we have more earnings this week. So I expect a lot of volatility in the market. This price movement doesn't bother me at all because of dollar cost averaging, which I talk about basically in every video, especially for new investors. And I'm going to keep this brief because you can go check out my playlist and listen to this multiple times. But dollar cost averaging smooths out volatility over time because the market grows when you give it enough time. But you can see my available for withdrawal sitting at 1117 currently. One thing I want to call out, which is really neat in the Paycheck to Portfolio system, the market can actually be down, but your account value can actually be growing. You can see I opened up this starter account for my daughter, Emma, in October. And at that point, at the end of October, it was worth basically $2,500. You can see in November, it went up to $2,531. December, $2,869. January, basically $3,000. And then currently we're sitting at $3,100. So even though the market's been down, the account's growing because of velocity banking. We're adding more and more funds, and then we're fully deploying those funds and then borrowing from our own equity. So over time, the market's going to rebound. It's going to go up as time goes on. The volatility is going to smooth out, as we just talked about with dollar cost averaging. And the account's going to grow over time as well. And she'll be able to basically break free from a 9-to-5 job much sooner. A few tabs I want to show you through this morning is the balances tab in E-Trade. This is basically what the equity is doing. So anytime money comes in, you'll see it pop up down here like a transfer. Basically, any cash that hits the account pays down the margin balance. When you see a negative number in your account like this on a cash and margin balance view, that's basically a margin draw or pulling from your own equity to pay bills, or you borrowed from your equity to make investments. Anytime you're using margin, you'll see that negative number. So any money that comes into the account pays down the margin balance first, which in turn increases your equity percentage right here. This is your ownership percentage right here. And then if you think about the portfolio like a house, a piece of real estate is the easiest analogy. This is the total value of the house is $3,974. That's the gross portfolio value. When you deduct the margin amount from that here, you get your net portfolio value here, $3,114. So if you think about it like a piece of real estate, and I'm using some different numbers, right? But it would be like a $500,000 house, and the mortgage is $150,000 would be 50% equity, to give you an idea. So a piece of real estate's the most common asset that we'll purchase that we borrow against, typically with a HELOC or different things like that. Margin works the same exact way. Now, the caveat is you need a $2,000 account to be margin approved. Margin does not show up on a credit report because you're borrowing from yourself. And it works just like a piece of real estate. Again, the gross portfolio value, what's the value of the house? And then what do I own free and clear if I sold the house today at escrow and they cut me a check? Is the difference between the gross portfolio value, the margin used, and the net equity at the end of the day. So that's how I'm constantly deploying money and how I'm constantly reinvesting money and how I'm growing despite a down market right now since I started in October, as we've discussed. One other thing I want to go over in detail with you this morning, just so we can talk about it, is margin. E-Trade has a very, very good margin tab, and really all the brokerages do this. They just do this in different ways. I wanted to start to introduce this more, and I'm going to talk about it more. If you look at the margin maintenance requirements down here, each asset has a margin maintenance requirement. If you own a home or you've invested in a home, if you've ever refinanced a home, basically the bank will lend you typically 80 to 85% of what they call loan to value ratio. I have a wholesale real estate business and multiple other businesses as well. So, when you go and you find a house that's maybe foreclosed, or you go and you find a house that's severely depressed from a market value perspective, you can get that house under contract and you can look at what the after repair value would be. And then the bank will lend you, once you get to that point, 80 to 85% of that actual after repair value at times. And so you can borrow against that equity, or even sometimes that potential equity in the right situation. E-Trade does the same thing with a brokerage account. They just call it margin maintenance requirements. And quite frankly, all the brokerages do this. If you want to be part of the community in the membership Discord, we have people living out of E-Trade, Fidelity, Schwab, Robinhood, Interactive Brokers. All of them can work. They just have their own functionality within their brokerage. So if you want to be part of a community and learn more about that, you can, and that's available under my pinned comments. But basically, margin maintenance requirements work the same way as a loan to value ratio on a piece of real estate. So I'm going to go through this step by step. Looking at Bitcoin here, BTCI, this is a covered call fund on Bitcoin. We all know, even right now, Bitcoin's very, very volatile, right? And in this situation currently, the margin maintenance requirement on BTCI is 100%. So every dollar I invest, 100% of that dollar is tied up in margin maintenance requirements up here. If you look at CLM or CRF, Cornerstone, they're 30% margin maintenance names. So for every dollar I invest into Cornerstone, E-Trade only locks up 30 cents of that dollar. If I invest $1,000, they're locking up $300. So that's a really neat concept when you think about living out of your brokerage account. If you bring in $1 and you invest into a 30% margin maintenance name, 30 cents of that dollar is locked up. 70 cents of that dollar is still free in your equity to live off of, to potentially buy additional assets if you would like. And then you can see the other funds with the margin maintenance names are there. Some of them are 50%. Again, the concept's still exactly the same. 50 cents for every dollar is going to be locked up in your margin maintenance requirements. If you look at the very top here, E-Trade takes all of those margin maintenance requirements or loan to value ratio, and they say, okay, we're locking up $1,744 of your equity. Essentially, you cannot borrow from this equity. We're tying it up from a loan to value ratio perspective based off of the margin maintenance requirements. When you look at total margin equity, I have $3,117, which we looked at, at the beginning under the balances tab up here at the very top. Therefore, I have $1,372 of margin maintenance excess. And you can see that that's pretty close, within a couple $100 of my available for withdraw amount. And this is basically when I swipe the E-Trade debit card, or I do a withdraw to pay for my electric bill or my water bill, this is the number that it's pulling from right here. So every time my paycheck comes in next week, I'll deposit $250. That will add to my equity percentage under the balances tab. I'll fully invest that in the asset. Some will be 100%, 30%, 50%. So it won't eat all of my equity. And then I'm going to simply borrow from myself to pay the bills. So again, I'm getting velocity banking. I'm getting cash flow velocity. I'm getting equity growth. And over time, I'm going to get market growth as well. And all of those things can break you free from a 9-to-5 job much quicker. E-Trade has a handy dandy margin calculator here. You can go and you can add legs. So let's say you wanted to buy a few stocks. We can go SPYG for growth. We can go Cornerstone for closed-end funds. And we could go QQQI for high yield funds. And you could just go, two hundreds fine there, and we'll go 5 there just so you could see, what that would be. And it would calculate it up here for you. It will show you your current balances and purchasing power. And then if you hit calculate impact, it will show you the change in liquidity to your available for withdrawal. And you can see the available for withdrawal did not go down all that much That's because of the margin maintenance names here. This is 30% margin maintenance, 30% margin maintenance, and 50% margin maintenance. So you can see how you can leverage your account if you do it wisely, right? You don't want to over leverage yourself. Sometimes in our membership Discord, amongst the group, we'll have conversations about Robinhood typically has lower margin maintenance names. E-Trade, Schwab may have higher margin maintenance names. That can be a double-edged sword at times. If you have lower margin maintenance and you're spending too much money, you can over leverage yourself. If you have too high of margin maintenance names, you can make it difficult to borrow from yourself. So just like anything in life, the middle ground is often the best ground. So you want to make sure you know how to manage your money. You want to make sure you're looking at your account equity, and you want to make sure you're borrowing responsibly to basically grow your business. And if you're new to my channel, I treat my portfolio like a business. My background's in private equity management and executive leadership. I'm running my portfolio from an equity, growth, and cash flow perspective, just like any company does, right? Is they create a balance sheet for themselves. They're growing their equity. They're borrowing from the business to pay debts and the service, labor costs and all those things. All I've done is structure all of my accounts that way so I can live out of them and I can borrow against them. If you think about Elon Musk, when he went and bought Twitter at the time, he did not pay cash. He could have easily paid cash for that account, but instead of paying cash, he went and borrowed from Tesla margin to pay most of what was due on Twitter, and he simply borrowed against himself because it was a non-taxable event to borrow. Obviously, loans are non-taxable. And then two, he just leveraged his equity that he already created in another company. And that's what wealthy people do all the time. If you look at performance, year to date, we were starting to pick up steam here in January. You can see we were starting to pass all the indexes except for the Russell. The Russell's been doing pretty well this year because of rate cuts. So the Russell has a whole bunch of small cap names in there. And so when rate cuts hit, small caps tend to do very well. But you can see in January, the market started to pick up steam for us. We were outperforming the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, the Dow. The Russell was the only one left that we were kind of struggling with. But even with the market choppiness, we're still only down 0.33%. The S&P 500 is up 1.4%. The NASDAQ's down basically 2%. The Dow's up 2%, and the Russell's up basically 8%. So as time goes on here and money comes in and the cash inflows, we'll start to bounce back and outperform these indexes over time. Just like in my large account, if you look at my large account here, I'm beating all the indexes over the last year, up basically 30%. 2 years up 62%, and then 3 years right there with the NASDAQ at 94%. So that's what's going to happen in the Spark to Fire account just as time goes on, right? I mean, the account just started, so obviously year to date was the view we were just looking at, but that's how you can check that. The estimated income tab in E-Trade, you can see your projected dividends over the next year. One thing the brokerages really struggle with is the concept of total return. Total return is how is your equity growing and then adding your dividends back into that paper gain or loss. That's the proper accounting from a business perspective. So E-Trade, unfortunately, does not roll these trailing dividends back into this number. You have to manually calculate that yourself, either by adding your dividends back in or working with a software that will do that for you. But over the next 1 year, you can see I'm projected in this account to have $826 coming in. Over the next 1 month, let's grab 1 month here, you can see it's projected to throw off about $74. So each cycle that comes in, I'm getting, again, that velocity banking concept, but I'm also creating more and more dividends. And instead of spending the money to zero, I own an asset and an equity that I can live off of long term. And ultimately, this is going to be my daughter living off of this at 18 years old. And when she's 25 or 30, this account's going to just snowball on itself, and she'll be way ahead of most people at that age. So, again, if you would like to join the community, you can check out all of my resources under the pinned comments. I have a white glove service and coaching, which is shoulder to shoulder training with me. We have our private Discord and membership. where we're all talking about how we're living out of our brokerage as a community. I have a 30-minute strategy call if you want to talk about this more on a higher level. And then I have a free starter kit and calculator so you can plug in your own numbers to see how your own finances may be impacted. Hope you found this video useful. Please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to everybody Saturday with my large account. Talk soon.